Welcome to the Indiana History Project. I'm your host, Norm Taylor. Good to have you along with us today. You know, back in 1974, in the fall, there was a merger of the high schools of Lawrence County. It became Bedford North Lawrence High School. The fall of 1974 changed for a lot of communities in Lawrence County. Before then, we had the schools of Williams, Huron. We had Fayetteville, Shawswick, Oolitic, Needmore. We had, before Tunnelton, Bedford High School. All these schools that eventually ended up merging, coming into Bedford North Lawrence, and the communities lost their high schools. It's still something today that is debated, talked about, but back in before 1974, people cherished, loved their high schools, still do, with very fond memories. But now we can go through some of these communities today, and now even some of the buildings are gone. When I look back at some of the high schools that we used to have and used to go to the old gyms and play basketball or go for various functions, and I think about all the good times, about all the kids that came through there and all the great memories that were involved with these schools, and then all of a sudden now the building's gone, but the memories remain. Now we can still see some of the old buildings. If you go into the town of Oolitic, still the old high school is still there. There's nothing in there as far as I know right now, but it's still there. I think the old gym is used. The Needmore School has been torn down. The Williams School is still there. You can see that. It consolidated way before even Bedford North Lawrence. Springville, no matter where you go, Shawswick, remnants are still the old school there, Shawswick. You could go on and on. But the high schools meant a lot to people. It's there where you started to grow up, where you started to form relationships, where you had your first dates, where you had your first crush, where you got to know some great teachers. So high school days mean a lot to people. That's why you have alumni associations. That's why you have reunions, because people like to get together and talk about that very formative years. So whether you went to Shawswick High School or Tunnelton or Williams or Oolitic, Needmore, well, your old high school meant a lot to you. But whenever the building's gone, and now you can talk about the old school and what do you have left? That's what we're going to talk about in today's segment of the Indiana History Project. It's what are we going to do with the old clothing, the old sports memorabilia, the old ball jackets, the band uniforms. What happened to all those things of the old schools? And what happens at a time whenever finally it hits a generation where they no longer really want this stuff anymore? There's no longer any room. There's no emotional attachment to it. Sure, grandfather or great-grandfather used to play basketball for Needmore back in the 1930s, but no longer there just seems to be room for this stuff anymore. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today, preserving these precious artifacts of our local history. Because all of this stuff that went through our schools, whether it was ball uniforms or band uniforms or yearbooks, these contain pictures and memories of days gone by that many of us hold very precious. Today I have a very, very special guest, and been a friend of mine for a while, and one that has been a jewel for the community, has done a lot to preserve Lawrence County history, and I've got Larry King with me. Larry, good to have you, my friend, with us today.
Thank you, Norm. Thank you.
Larry has been associated with the museum for a lot of years. Now, you're not in the museum. You belong to the museum, but you're not in the museum, are you?
I'm not an artifact. I'm one that leaves daily.
Okay, good. Larry, you went to the old Oolitic school, so you and I have that in common.
Yes.
And in fact, if I remember right, you played for the first Oolitic basketball championship, sectional championship. Is that right?
That's right. First Oolitic sectional.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Along with Bobby Lovell, that people remember.
Who else was on that team there, Larry?
Bobby Lovell, John Cummings, Don Hatfield, Jim Silvers, Dean Duncan. I think that's the starting ones there. There was more, but that's the starting.
Who was the coach back then?
Bill Luce.
Bill Luce.
Bill
Oh,
Luce.
my goodness. Well, you just mentioned some of these names, and these names to Oleitic people are icons because, you know, that was the very first basketball sectional that Oleitic won.
It was,
In
yes, it was.
1954. 1954. You know, that was right around the time when Milan, wasn't it Milan in 1954?
Same year that
Yeah.
Milan went to the state. Yes, it was.
Yeah, they won at 1954. You guys won your first sectional. That'd have been something if you guys could have met in the Final Four, wouldn't it?
Well, would like to have, yes.
Well, who'd you play in the regional that year?
Seymour. We were defeated by Seymour.
Oh.
6 points.
Oh.
We went to Jeffersonville to play, but we were defeated by them. 70-64, I believe, if I recall
you
right.
guys held your own.
Oh, yes, we did, yes. Yeah, actually, we went down there, and I think we were kind of the nervous kid on the block, and as the game went on, we kind of settled down, and we closed in and made a close game out of it.
And boy, Seymour would have been a lot bigger school than Oleitic at that
Yes.
time.
Yeah, Seymour, New Albany, and Jeffersonville, and Oleitic was in the regional that year.
Back in when you were in school in the 1950s at Oleitic, about what was the size of the 4 grades? Do you happen to remember that at all?
In our class, we had a senior class when I graduated. We had 47 members to graduate.
Okay, well, that's not too bad of a size class. Well, we only had 58 in 1971, so we didn't have many more than that.
No.
And so it was a small school, but I guess compared to some of the other schools, you're right in the ballpark with some of the others, Needmore and
Right.
Shawswick and the rest of them there.
Yeah, true.
Did you? What was the atmosphere like in the 1950s, Larry, and on a Friday night in 1954? What was the atmosphere like at Little Oleitic whenever there was a home ball game going on?
Well, Friday night with basketball, it was the night, the subject in Friday night. It was just the total subject, and everyone thought basketball on Friday night.
Yeah.
We played Tuesdays and Fridays normally at Oleitic.
Okay, I didn't know that. Tuesdays
Yes,
too.
Tuesdays and Fridays was our normal games. We did not play very few Saturday games.
And, on Friday night, then it was there wasn't a whole lot else to do.
No.
So did you ever use a pretty good crowds for that?
Yes, we did. As a matter of fact, at Oleitic, our junior and senior year, they also put in seats for several of the games, extra seats for those games because the Oleitic gymnasium wouldn't hold it.
What was your record that year?
Our junior year, we were 18-7,
Wow.
and our
okay.
senior year was 16-9.
So that was you went through some pretty good years there.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did. Enjoyable years.
Who was the rivals back then?
Well, we played, of course, we played Mitchell. Our junior year, the year we won the sectional, we played Mitchell 4 times. We played at home and away, so it was 2 games. We went to Mitchell for a New Year's Day tourney. Mitchell beat us those 3 times, and then we met Mitchell in the sectional. We drew out with Mitchell in the sectional and finally got to return the favor to them.
I tell you, it's hard to beat when you play someone that many times. You get to know each
true.
other pretty well.
Yes, we
You're
did.
not going to have any surprises for the other team.
No, we almost knew the opposition as well as we did our teammates.
Yeah. So you played Mitchell. Who else did you play in the second?
We played, let's see, that year we drew out with Mitchell, and then we played Orleans, Bedford, and Heltonville on Saturday night.
All right.
And,
So Heltonville and Oleitic was in the final game in
yes,
1954.
Heltonville and Oleitic was in the final game. And someone told me later that this was Heltonville's only time they made it to the final game. And they had a very good team that year.
Yeah.
I think, I don't remember their record exactly, but it was close to ours, a very good record.
So was that a pretty close game in the sectional final?
The Bedford game on Saturday afternoon, we defeated Bedford by 3 points in an overtime.
Oh.
The game we drew out with Mitchell, the 3 previous games that Mitchell beat us, they were all close, within 1 to 3 points. And then in the final of the sectional, we got them 16 or 18 points.
Oh, okay.
And then the Saturday night game at the time was one of the big games. Bobby Level scored 50 points on that night.
50 points.
50 points at Saturday night game.
My goodness, and that I know that stood as a record until Danny Bush he
right.
scored 51 or 52. I
That's
can't
right.
remember, but somewhere
51 or
I
2,
think
yes.
he broke the record, didn't
Yes, he did.
So
in the
that
late
held
60s.
for a long time.
In the late 60s.
Yeah, he was Bob was a real scorer. He was a big guy.
Yes,
Yeah,
he was.
Yeah, you had a pretty good sized team for back then.
Yes, we did. For
1950s.
that era, yes.
Yeah.
We did.
You know, back when you look back in your time for you, were you from Springville?
No, I actually was raised at the edge of Bedford here. It was one block out. I went to a school called Dive, at Dive School. And at the time, the first block out could actually go to Bedford High School or Oolitic School.
Yeah.
And at that time, basketball was probably one of my main interests.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I possibly would play more basketball at Oolitic. So I chose Oolitic over Bedford for that reason. at
So
that
you were
time.
just a block out, so around there in
Within
Breckenridge
the
area,
first-
somewhere in
yes,
that
I
area
was.
there. Yeah.
First block outside the city limits.
Well, I went to the old dive school too.
Oh, you
and,
did? I didn't
sure,
know that.
Sure did. I'm an old dive bomber as
Okay,
well.
well, that's dive ball.
Did they ever have a basketball team there, dive?
Oh, yes, we played basketball when I was there.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we did.
Do you
And,
remember what the school colors were by any chance?
Red
Or-
and white.
Red and white.
Red and white.
Is that right? And they actually, where did the dive bombers play at?
Well, we played Heltonville. We played Huron. We played Bedford, junior high. That's the main ones we played, yes.
So where did they play? They didn't have a gym there at dive, did
No, we actually practiced outside, except one
Okay.
night a week we would go to Oolitic and practice in the old gymnasium at Oolitic. We got one night a week practice.
they? Okay, so
And,
you're...
person by the name of Opal Ford.
Oh, I
we
remember
taught
him.
many years.
I had
from
him.
Helton.
Oh,
You
sure,
had
I had
Opal
him.
also.
Yeah.
Yes, he
Yeah.
was our coach.
He had a huge paddle. I can remember that. I mean, he had well, it seemed like back then it was
Yeah,
huge. It
huge
seemed like it
paddle.
was large. And it seemed like I remember holes in the paddle, but I don't know why I could do that. But I can remember his big paddle he had.
Yes.
But Opal's taught there for a lot of years at
Great
the old
teacher.
dive school. Well, I never knew that you were a dive bomber.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I was. I went there 8 years.
Well, I'll be. Okay. Well, I was in, well, when they closed that school out back in 1964, I think it was, I was in the 4th grade, so I was one of the last classes there. So
Okay.
when you look back at whether it's a dive school, and of course that building is still there.
Yes.
Or you going to Oolitic, those pretty good memories for you.
Oh, great memories. They really are, yes.
And
Really enjoyed it.
and you have spent a lot of time, you and I both have a passion for preserving history, Larry, and I just hate, and I know I've talked to a lot of people in the community, they feel the same way, that I hate that all these schools that meant so much to us, whether it was Dive or it was Oolitic or Shawswick or Needmore, Tunnelton, Williams, that the artifacts, the things from this school, the ball uniforms, the band uniforms, and all these things that were connected with it, that they have disappeared. A lot of these have disappeared. They're gone.
Yes, they have.
And I have tried to figure out, Larry, and I know with consolidation, and I know they would have had to have gotten rid of a lot of stuff, and there was a big transitional time. But I know you've been asked this question. I've asked the question, what really happened to all of these ball uniforms and scorebooks and band uniform? What happened from Fayetteville and Charlotte? What happened to all these things?
Unfortunately, I don't think anyone has that answer.
I've never found anybody with the answer.
I haven't either.
And that's why we're throwing it out there, you folks, because the only thing that Larry and I, and we've talked about this, have come up with, that whenever the transition occurred, that a lot of this stuff was just thrown away. That's the only thing that we've come up with, Larry.
That's
Isn't
true.
that true?
That's true.
So given the fact that we're back, and now anybody that would have graduated from these county schools now would be in their 50s, the youngest people
Yes,
would
right.
now be in their 50s.
Yes.
One of these days, and I guess we don't like to think about this, but this is a fact, that eventually one day there will not be anybody left on this earth that attended any of these schools, Larry.
That's true.
We're all mortal, we're all going to be leaving. And so this generation is going to pass.
Yeah. I attended the Oolitic alumni banquet this last week, and it was commented there that the last graduate from Oolitic would have to be approximately 54 years old at this time now.
Okay.
So it's
yeah,
slipping away.
And then every time you go to alumni banquets, I know my mom was a Huron graduate, and she went to them for years, but every year there would be fewer or someone that you knew that had
Yes.
passed on. So
Yes.
one of these days, Larry, that nobody, we're all going to be gone that ever went to any of these schools. So what we want to do is we want to preserve, we want people to know that there was a Williams High School, that there was a Huron High School, a Tunnelton High School, that these schools were a big part of our community at one time. They were important to us, that actually it existed. And the only way that we can do that, especially if the buildings are gone by that time,
That's true.
is by preserving some of the things. Right? Is that correct?
That's true.
So at one time, I guess the museum started, and Larry's worked with the Lawrence County Historical Society and the museum for a lot of years. But at one time, I guess somebody started catching a vision of preserving some of the things that went through these high schools.
Yes.
Do you know anything about that?
Well, I think that is really growing in the last, I'm going to say, 15 years of trying to preserve this. Prior to that time, I guess everyone didn't realize that it was slipping away. And it seems to be that many people are realizing that it is slipping away from us now. And so we are collecting items at the museum. Anyone would bring some in and would like to donate them. And so most of our items has come within, from school items, has come within the past 15 years.
Because I think, Larry, that families that have a hold of these that their grandfather had, you know, they're not going to be wanting to let go of these things. I mean, that's going to be something a great-grandfather had. He had an old ball uniform or something. So they're not going to, but eventually, like I say, that through the generations or through just the necessity of space or whatever, finally, though, people say, well, I don't have any place to put this anymore. Is that how you get some of this stuff?
That's true. In some of the generations, as it goes down the generation, there's not as much interest there because they don't know the story behind these items.
And that's part of what we're trying to preserve, because with every item that we have today that you brought in and I brought in, there's a story behind this.
Yes, there is.
I mean, we could if we'd had an old desk from Dive School, we may not know really what classroom it was in or what, but there would certainly been stories of kids and generations of kids that just sat in that desk and that would have meant something. But there's a story behind all these things.
Also, we are collecting yearbooks at the museum from all the different schools, and we have many, many yearbooks there, and it's one of the popular items when people come in. Today's school groups will come in and will give a tour, and I'll say, does anyone know where their parents graduated from high school? Well, we'll pull the yearbook down, and they can see what their parents look like in high school, and it's really a popular item.
They get a kick out of that, don't they?
They do. Yes, they do.
I'm the only one that hasn't changed since I graduated.
Sure, yes.
Larry, when you look at the old yearbooks, how far back do you go? What's some of your oldest what you have?
The oldest yearbook we have is Bedford in 1911, and we think this is the first year that Bedford put out a yearbook, is what we think. And we have them from several of the schools dating back many, many years. We do not have all of them, but we have many, many yearbooks that we've collected down through the years.
So would you say almost every school in the county is represented? With the yearbook you have one from Williams, Huron, and all those schools.
We have all of them. Even a Lawrenceport put out, I think, put out one approximately 1 year, 1 or 2 years. We even have a copy of that one from Lawrenceport.
Is that right?
Yes.
So I didn't even know Lawrenceport had a high school.
It's grade school.
It was a grade school.
And they put out one of the grade school. And also Dive put out one or 2 years. That was close to the years that you were there, I think. It was 61 or 2 or something like that. I think they put out
I never even remember seeing that.
Yes.
Yeah, I would have been there, started school in 1959.
Okay.
So I was there from 59 and until the close of the school in 63. It was 63. I'm sorry, I said 64. It was 63. Okay. I started we all started in the other schools 64 or in the fall, but it was 63 whenever Dive shut down. Okay, I've got that.
Also, I think on the front of the Dive building it says 1917, and what is always special to me is my mom told me that was the first year she went there, the first year they had school there.
In 1917.
17, I think it's 17.
So you see, and we could go on and on this, but that building and that school has significance to you, because not only for you, but you had a parent that went there, so there's a lot of memories involved there, and the building itself, when you see that, then it has emotional significance there for you.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. But all of a sudden we had consolidation, and the schools were no more, except that they were still elementary schools and junior high, so they still went on like that for a while. But like I say, some of the buildings are gone now. But a lot of this stuff, I guess, Larry, it disappeared. I guess it was just thrown away. And we've often wondered about that decision, but there was a lot of history that was lost there. That's kind of a shame.
That's true.
But now we're trying to preserve what we can. And so that's what this show is about again, is that this stuff that we have that went to the old high schools, now it does mean a lot to people, and we want to do all that we can to preserve it. So if there's a time now in which you have stuff that you don't know what to do with it anymore, then what can they do, Larry?
Bring it to the museum. We would be glad to have any items donated. We really cater to especially Lawrence County items, and really if you have anything with the schools, related to the schools, we definitely would enjoy having it.
And that can be a variety of things.
A variety of things, yes. We have a
Yearbooks,
big
we
variety.
mentioned yearbooks, sports memorabilia.
I was looking yesterday at one of ours, and we have an actual schedule from 1847 Lawrence High School.
Lawrence
And
High School.
I didn't know it was there till I saw it in there yesterday.
The 1947 Lawrence High?
1847.
1847.
1847.
1847. Lawrence
It's a
High
schedule.
School.
Lawrence.
And where was that located? You have any
I
idea?
have no idea.
I don't either.
I don't.
I mean, we could go back. I always thought it'd be interesting, because we had one-room schoolhouses at this time. At one time, it'd been interesting to be able to find at least where they were at. I did one on the old Bryant'sville,
Yes.
school at one time. They had a high school team. My grandfather played for 1927 for the old Bryant'sville high school team. They had a high school. These are things that we want to remember. You brought some stuff with you, Larry, today, and tell us a little bit about what you brought.
Okay, just before that, I'd like to comment that my wife is actually putting together, she was a teacher, and she's putting together information from old schools all over the county. And it's going to make a very interesting book when she gets it completed. I might give you an example. In the 1920s, I think there was 92 schools in Lawrence County or something. It's unbelievable the amount of schools. Okay, we can go to the items.
How
that we
many
have.
schools? In
90, I think it was 92 schools in Lawrence County.
in what year?
In the 1920s, I think it was the 20s.
1920.
1915. Okay, she said 1915.
I didn't know this. 1915, there were 92 schools in Lawrence County. That's interesting.
When you do the research, it's unbelievable what you find.
Well, that's the way it is when you start doing research, because you start rabbit chasing, don't you? I mean, if something hits you, then you start going down
That's
this
right.
road, and I didn't
Very
know
true.
that. 1950, 92
1915,
schools.
15.
92 schools in Lawrence County.
Yes.
Well, that is fascinating. You brought this stuff with you, and people have taken the time to bring it, and some of this is just precious stuff. Tell us a little bit about what you brought, Larry.
Okay, I can mention some of the things that we have here. I'll start out with, I brought about 5 items, and the first one I brought out here it's a Need More cheerleading sweater, and this was worn by Bernetta Denny, and many people still remember Bernetta. She retired in 1982. She taught in many, many schools. I understand she started out in very small schools. She's taught Avoca, East Olytic, Shawswick, Mitchell, Heltonville, Bedford Junior High, Bedford High School, and she was also a counselor out here at Bedford North Lawrence, I understand.
Okay.
But this is her cheerleading sweater that she wore from 1927 to 1931. Many people that still remember had fond memories of her. I heard some people at the museum this week says, I told them I was bringing her sweater out here, and they had all positive comments about her.
Yeah.
I guess she taught 47 years
Yeah.
total, and so everything was positive about her. It's a pleasure when you pick up something and you do research about these people. I called a person by the name of Isel Noggle, possibly you know Isel, but anyhow, she was a good friend of Bernetta, and she's the one that donated this after Bernetta passed away.
I see.
And so that's came in within the last few years.
The condition of this is just fantastic.
It is. I might turn it around here where you
Yes.
can actually see
Yeah.
where it says.
Need more hilltoppers.
Need more Hilltoppers, and it
Yeah,
actually
look
says there on the back there.
You got the yell,
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
But
Yeah.
that's something that has been preserved very, very well.
And and then cheerleading uniforms, I understand, and see in Bedford North Lawrence, Dave Beaver, assistant principal here, he's kind of spearheading an effort too, because people bring him old yearbooks and stuff, and have collecting stuff, and the old, he's got, I believe, that Access or somebody brought in an old Tunnelton cheerleader uniform. So, do you have a few cheerleader uniforms? Is there-
Very few. I was trying to think if we had others besides this, but we are very short on cheerleading uniforms. Yes, we are short on those.
Yeah.
We are short.
Okay.
Okay, move up to the next item. This next item here is from Williams High School.
Wow.
And it's a band uniform, and we have the hat.
Oh, look at that.
Hat.
I'll hold this here for you. Look
Okay.
at that. With WHS, the Williams
Yeah.
High School.
The
Fantastic.
tie that went with it. They had a cape. This is a cape that went with it.
Oh,
and
my
also the pants. We also have the picture of the entire Williams High School band at that time. But what's most interesting about this was worn by Lee Thompson.
Oh,
And
look at
Lee
the
came
jacket.
in and gave me the story behind this. And at that time, the schools did not wash and clean the band uniforms. So Lee had taken his home to be cleaned on the night of 1943, and the Williams School burned.
Oh.
And this is the only surviving uniform, band uniform from that time. So he told me, I said, we went to Williams School burned, and then they joined Huron, and which was their opposition at the time, basketball opposition.
Yeah. Big
so he
time
went to
rival.
Huron for 2 years, he said, where he found his wife, and then he come back and graduated from Williams.
Yeah.
But it makes a real interesting story when you can actually talk to the people that's actually donated. And we have many of these items, that, such as Lee Thompson with this uniform here, that really makes it puts a story behind it, and if you can hear the story behind it, even makes it more interesting.
You know, isn't that just a stroke of luck there that, that he had this, because like I say, as far as you know, this is the only surviving band uniform of Williams High School.
That's what he told us. It's the only surviving band uniform.
And if he hadn't taken it home to clean it that night, they would all have been lost to
all
history.
been lost, that's right.
But you have a picture there.
Yes.
Is that of the Williams High School band then?
That's
So
of
there
the
would
William
be-
High School band, and they are actually wearing this uniform here of all the band members. And we also have a paper here that gives the names of each one of the band members, and so it's really interesting if you come in and you can actually see who some of these people really are.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I guess you have people that come in that would have went to Williams High School, that come into the museum, right?
Yes.
And that becomes, obviously they're going to center in on this type of thing and give you these stories.
Yes.
Larry, here's a question though that it's really bringing up now. Like I said, we know now the story behind this, and this show is going to help preserve that story behind this uniform. But what happens whenever people come and they give you these verbal stories though? I mean here, and you have it now. You have this treasure trove of information. But I know you're not going to be able to stop and just write down every story there, Larry. What happens to these stories?
Most of the stories that we have here is when someone donates something, we ask them to kind of give us a little idea. This is what we usually follow. I was fortunate enough here that Lee is still living. And about 2 weeks ago, I went to Lee and I said, I'm going to use your uniform on this program. Can you give me some more information? So I was able to pick that up there. So maybe preserving it on this show may preserve more of the information.
That's very true. And alumni associations need more. Shawswick, Huron, Williams. Listen, when you get together, talk about this, preserving, because people will just toss this stuff out. Talk about how you can preserve this within your own schools, and contact Larry about this. Make sure that if it does pass out of hands, that it's just not thrown away. We want to preserve this type of thing. And also alumni associations, and a lot of you are getting together this time of year, that if you have an alumni association that you want to talk about your old school, I'll be glad to do a show on this. Bring in some stuff and bring in some people. I want to talk about the teachers who used to be there and some of the experiences you had on the playgrounds or at proms or whatever the case would be. We want to preserve your school, so make sure you get a hold of me. I'll be glad to have you Need More Hilltoppers. Us Bearcats, we were rivals with you guys, but all's forgiven now. Or at Bedford Stonecutters, whatever the case, we want to have your show on here. So, so again, Larry, what else you have?
Okay, one other item I have here is we're moving up to 1959. This is a Heltonville honor jacket, basketball honor jacket. This belonged to a person by the name of Gary McDonald. And I had the privilege of calling him on the phone yesterday and say, can you give me any more information about this? So he said, I can't give you just a lot of information, but he said, well, one thing I did my senior year when I got this, I won the county sportsmanship award.
Okay.
I thought that was interesting. Then he said, well, one other thing, he said, I did break my hand to playing basketball that year, and he said they had to tape it up, and I had to shoot left-handed the rest of the season.
Okay, so see, there were stories behind
There were stories
that.
behind this,
yes. With every item that you have here and every item you have in the museum, there is a story behind it, like you said. But unfortunately, the stories are lost because they're just handed down verbally. Unless Larry, we write something down or we record it in some way. I mean, how many times I've said this? I do a lot of veteran shows, and we've talked about this with the veterans off there, but stories that we've heard, and you think, well, my goodness, I will always remember them, but we don't. They became hazy over the year. I remember Dad talking about his times in Korea, and I've heard them all my life, but now that he's been gone for several years, the stories become now hazy. They become, I get mixed up on the years, and I wish I would have taken the time to write them down. So we're always encouraging people to preserve.
Yes, that's true.
Yep. What else we have?
Okay, I have another item here. We're moving up to 1964, and Ray
Okay.
Robinson, who is
Yeah, an attorney
still
here.
attorney here in Bedford,
Yep.
and I really enjoy calling these people and say, can you give me some information about some of these things?
Yeah, I just want to see Ray get back into these.
Yes.
That's what
Yes.
I just ate with him at Wendy's just the other day, and boy, Ray, if you're watching, I want to see you try to get these on. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I asked him about some of the things that were on here, and one of the stories he gave me I thought was very interesting. He says, on the back you will see a calendar.
Uh-huh.
And he
Yeah.
says the reason the calendar is on there is, he says, I was on the track team. And I was running in track, and he says, when I finished that day, he said, I asked him what my time was. And he says, they gave me a calendar. So he said, that's the reason
good.
I put that. I thought that was an interesting story.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the rivalries a while ago.
And these are called senior chords,
Senior
right?
chords,
Senior
right.
chords.
Senior chords,
Yeah,
yes.
and we got a story behind that, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
And some of these things like right
Yeah,
here.
right here, this is
what
one-
is this thing here? What is this?
This thing right here, you was mentioning rivalry a while ago.
Yeah.
He told me, he said, this year Mitchell defeated Bedford in football 44-6. And so he says, I put that on there.
This is like a voodoo doll, and it's got the pins in it. Now, the Bedford,
that's
remember,
true.
Mitchell and Bedford were rivals, and they still are to this day. But
And he was on the yearbook staff somewhere on here, he told me.
Yeah.
It's we can find it, but he was, I don't see the yearbook
It's
staff,
kind
but
of
here is
interesting to
something
see.
here that he was also in the junior play.
Yeah, can
And,
any of you out there remember senior chords? I mean, you know, when you're looking at it, say, yeah, I used to have senior chords. Well, this is something that we are collecting too, but when I was coming through high school, they were a few still getting them, but it was kind of dying out here a little bit. I wonder
And it
why
was
J.C. Penney.
leap year.
Yeah,
This is the tag,
J.C. Penney
evidently.
$4.95. Well, the
He
tag
didn't
here.
explain that one.
Okay, but you know.
Leap year, 1964.
Okay.
He said he was an amateur radio fan.
Yeah,
at that
and he's
time,
still
so he
in
has
the
his
ham
call letters
radios.
on
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I didn't get an
There's old-
explanation of all of the things because when
Yeah.
I called him, he was going on memory. And he didn't.
Okay, well let's see if we can stop the world. I want to get off. Okay, right here in the bottom here, and he even had his name down here on the very bottom of this, Ray Robinson, and oh yeah, well you know, it's kind of neat. There's a lot of history to these chords because of what was happening in the time in your area or with your school. Booster of MHS Yazoo. It says the Booster Club. Here on Santa. So I think there's an emblem right here on front though, Larry.
DeMolay.
Right here. Do you have any idea what this
This
emblem
is
is?
DeMolay says. Now I don't have an explanation.
Or
He
the
didn't give
Order
me-
of DeMolay?
Order of DeMolay says
I don't
yes.
think I've ever heard of that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the orbit must have been the yearbook, yeah, like I say, in the business manager
he
here,
was-
and then
yeah, he was-
the class ring and all
Last
that.
ring there, yes. This is the year. 64 was his year. Assistant editor of the yearbook staff.
Okay. So it was going strong. Did you have senior chords in your time?
I still have them.
You still have the senior?
my
Can you
senior
still
card.
get in yours?
They're a little snug. A little bit tight.
Okay. But senior chords were getting, did everybody in the 1950s, and whenever I think of senior chords, Larry, I think of the 1950s. I mean, it seemed like it was hit its height right during that time.
Yes, that's true.
And
I think it
you learned an interesting fact before we got on air. You told me about senior chords. What was that?
Yeah, at our monthly meetings at the museum, we have a speaker come in each month and talk to us about different things. One of our speakers recently was a lady coming in and talking about senior chords. And it turned out that she says senior chords was only an Indiana tradition.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. It surprised me. She said they found one school just across the Illinois line that had senior chords, and that's the only one they've ever been able to find outside of Indiana.
And I always thought until today, until you mentioned that, and I bet there's going to be people out there who's going to say the same thing, I thought that senior chords everywhere. I thought it was, you know, American Graffiti to show me. I thought that they would be, I thought this was, but I don't remember chords in American Graffiti, come think of it, but I didn't know this. I didn't know this was just an Indiana thing.
I didn't either. And she talked like it kind of faded in the 70s is when it kind of faded away.
Yeah, well, that's
So-
true. I graduated in 71, and by that time it was almost gone. I didn't have any
Yes.
senior chords.
Yes.
There were a couple, three that did have. The girls would have skirts, you
Yes.
know, with senior chords. And again, this is kind of representative to what was happening in your life around that time, nationally or locally or about the school. And I can remember that many people had people's, all the classroom students, you know,
Yes.
sign it, or they had it, they had the names of all their classroom mates on there. Do you remember that at all?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And I guess if you're on the basketball team, whatever, the basketball, I
in
can
there.
remember basketball being on there, whatever.
We have senior skirts, and we also have some senior cards. Not just too many, but we could use more, but we do have some, and it's brings back an important part of your life. It really
You know,
is a great
it's-
memory.
It sure is. Larry, on the senior courts, who made these?
Well,
Did
different people made them. When the lady came in and talked to us, some people had them commercially made.
okay.
And my mother made mine, and she did all of the coloring of everything.
Okay,
She used to color
so
everything.
so it would have been maybe that, I don't know if you know, with Ray here, but maybe that somebody, he may have done this, or somebody knew
I don't
that
think
put
he
all this
told
stuff
me.
on
Yeah,
there.
he
or-
didn't tell me who
Yeah.
did his. I don't know who
Yeah.
did his. But different people worked on these, and I was surprised to learn that many of them was done commercially. But when you look at it, you can tell that they're really perfection.
Yeah, oh yeah, they did a great job. Well, we're going to move into 1970s, and this is going to be right before consolidation, but these are a couple items that I own, and I have an old, look here on the back, Bearcats. I've got an old Olytic warm-up, varsity warm-up jacket. Larry and I both played Olytic, for Olytic, and on the varsity there, and this one was given to me several years ago, and I quite honestly now, I wore this back when I was a junior. I know in school, maybe not this particular one, but I wore one that looked like this, and I don't even know now, I can't even remember who gave this to me or how they got a hold of it, but anyway, I'm glad they did, because it's still being preserved, and probably this will end up in the museum someday as well. Still in pretty good shape. And then, and folks, don't ask me to model this, because I can't do it. This is my old Olytic varsity jacket, and you'll see here 1971, and it had the basketball and baseball, cross country, and the track on it, and I lettered in these, and it still has the emblem, and it's still in pretty good shape. But again, I slept it on, and I didn't leave it on very long because I was afraid I was going to rip it. And I did have trouble buttoning it. I admit that, but I was a little bit thinner there. But these type of things that you have, and Larry, I do appreciate you bringing this stuff in, but these type of things do hold a lot of memory to a lot of people.
Right.
And it is a shame that we have lost a lot of this, but it's not too late in order to still preserve some of these things now.
That's true. That's true.
And so, Larry, when you look back, even personal items like class rings, do you have any class rings?
Yes, we do. We have some class rings. Not too many, but we do have some, yes.
Mm-hmm.
We really do. Matter of fact, my wife donated hers, which is a 1954 one, so it's many years
Okay.
ago.
Yeah, so, and these are things that over the years, unfortunately, they get lost, or they get, traded or handed down or something. But if a person is just going to get rid of them, we want to have these things, don't we?
I'd like to comment, too, that you don't have to wait until these things are 40 or 50 years old. I had brought in one more item
Yeah.
here that's not nearly as old, but it's Bedford North Lawrence. Dreams do come true, it says. 1990 state champs.
Oh, yeah.
So you can,
Sure.
you do not have to wait until something is entirely way outdated, but you can bring them in even today, things that you have that's connected with the school. We appreciate that also.
Yeah. Whenever you put these things on display, is that a popular thing then for the county? Do they really enjoy looking at this?
Oh, yes. Many people come in. Our school display has turned out to be very, very popular. It really has.
Right.
Very popular.
And I know at the History Festival this year, you guys brought in some pictures of the old schools.
Yes.
So you, even like photographs, anything like that, that you're preserving.
Yes.
And even like this display you had at the History Festival had the old schools, I think, and all that.
Yes.
So that's part of what you're doing as well.
Many schools are represented there because we had I think he was an Indiana University student that came there, and he done research and collected these, and we put these on posters, and we delivered them to the nursing homes and leave them there at the nursing homes, which the people there would bring back fond memories to them also.
Sure, I'm sure it would. So we look back, Larry, and like I say, some of the buildings are no longer there. A lot of the people that attended the buildings are no longer there. The basketball teams, they don't dribble on Friday nights anymore. We don't have the scorebooks. We don't have the cheerleaders. We don't have the bands that are performing of Shawswick and Olytic and Needmore and some of these schools. But we still have some of the clothing and artifacts, and we're going to do our best to preserve it.
Yes, we are.
What would you say to you is the neatest item in all of the things that you have seen preserved there at the museum as far as related with this subject we're talking about today?
Well, this band uniform with a story behind it, I thought it was just a great item of why we have it. And also Bernetta's cheerleading outfit here that's dating, what is that, about 80 years old now. And it's something there. So to me, those kind of items stand out.
Sure
They
do. Folks, part of preserving history is honoring the people of our ancestors, of the folks that we grew up with, our community. It is just not preserving a piece of clothing, it's preserving a part of us. When we talk about Shawswick School, we're talking about a group of people that went there, laughed there, studied there, achieved there, made friends there, lasting friendships. And no matter what school that we're talking about, these memories are extremely precious because they're involving people. It is preserving not only the artifacts of the material things we see here, it is preserving the memories of people. And after all, whether it was Dive or Olytic or Williams, the buildings that we could still see, well, the buildings are nice to look at, and I'm so grateful that we still have some of them. But wasn't it all about the people that were in there? Wasn't it all about your great-grandfather, your grandfather, and you yourself that went there? That's what we're attempting to preserve. Folks, I'm making an appeal for you out there today, is that if you went to one of these schools or you have any kind of artifacts on these schools, don't throw it away. Help us to preserve it. And when we're doing that, we're preserving a very important part of our lives and our community for generations in the future, for our children and our great-grandchildren, our grandchildren, and they're going to remember that, yes, there was a Tunnelton Indians, or Huron Beavers, or Bryantsville High School, or Dive Bombers, because of your efforts of preservation. Larry, I want to thank you again for being here today and all of your great work you do for preserving history in Lawrence County.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here, bringing these items.
Many kudos, and listen, they were just fantastic items that you brought us today. And folks, for you out there that went to these schools, they were great times, weren't they? And this is just part of preserving the past in Lawrence County. We appreciate you watching today. This has been an Indiana History Project. I'm your host, Norm Taylor. Thank you for watching.